keep hearing the hum of that old diner light whenever I try to remember where it began. The bulb flickered above our table, buzzing with a thin metallic whine. Dylan sat across from me, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled to the elbow. He looked like every other salesman who believed the world could still be bought with a smile. He said it like it wasn't a big thing. "You want some cash?" "Easy job. Just put these up." He slid a cardboard box toward me. Inside were neat stacks of glossy flyers, the kind printed in bulk, silver cars gleaming under studio light, a number stamped in red ink at the bottom corner. His number, his promise. I asked what the catch was. He laughed and said there wasn't one. "1,000 of these, I'll pay you $50, but if anyone calls and buys, we split the bonus, half and half." "Fair deal," I said yes because there was nothing else left to say. My rent was 2 weeks late. My phone plan had expired, and my refrigerator held nothing but half a lemon and a bottle of water. I told myself it was just paper, just a walk. We finished our coffee, cold and burnt, then stepped into the late afternoon. The sky was flat and white, the kind that erases shadows. Dylan's car smelled of lemon air freshener and stale smoke. He drove with one arm out the window, talking without pauses, the way confident men do when they know they've already won. He showed me how to move. "Don't start too early. 3 o'clock, that's the sweet spot. Morning shifts bring security guys. You don't want that." He taught me how to tape. Never on glass, never on paint. Always near the handle. "People touch handles," he said. "If they hate it, they'll still have to look." I watched him demonstrate, his hands fast, practiced, careless. Every motion said he'd done this for years. When he dropped me off, the sun was low, turning the asphalt gold. He gave me the box of flyers and said, "Keep them in your trunk. 5,000. You'll go through them faster than you think." The box was heavier than I expected. I remember the smell of ink, the faint static of fresh paper, the way my palms turned slightly red from carrying it. I put it in the trunk and closed the lid. The sound echoed longer than it should have. The next morning I drove out past the new developments, where billboards leaned over empty fields and the road lost its lines. The city looked like it was built to be forgotten. Half-demolished motels, boarded grocery stores, houses with curtains that never moved. I stopped near a cluster of low apartment blocks, 5 stories high, identical, built in the 70s maybe. Most windows were dark, a few had lights flickering like dying signals. Trash cans were tipped over, and the grass between the buildings had turned to dust. It looked perfect. Quiet enough to work, empty enough to ignore me. I started at the top floor. The stairwells smelled like rust and ammonia. Every door looked the same, pale blue paint, dented mail slots, dust in the corners. I tore the tape with my teeth, pressed the flyer flat, moved to the next door. By the 10th, my fingers were raw. By the 20th, I had the rhythm: walk, tear, stick, move. I kept going until the light changed. The hallway windows glowed orange, and the air thickened with heat. Someone slammed a door 2 floors below. I paused, listening. The sound didn't repeat. When I reached the last unit, I leaned against the railing. From there, I could see the whole complex, a maze of identical roofs and cracked parking lots. Across the street stood another row of buildings, darker, lower, older. They looked hollow. Something about the way they lined up felt wrong, like teeth missing in a grin. I went back to my car, wiped my hands with an old napkin, and looked at the box in the trunk. Still full. I'd barely made a dent. The sun was setting behind the industrial stacks, bleeding light across the road. A radio inside the car crackled alive by itself, just static, no station. I turned the knob, but every frequency sounded the same, a hiss, like someone whispering through cloth. I killed the engine, but the static kept going for a second longer. a faint breath hanging in the air before it vanished. The streets were empty when I drove away. Every red light felt longer than usual. Every window looked back. That night, I couldn't sleep. The flyers were still in the trunk, sealed in their box, waiting for me to finish the job. I told myself it was simple, just another day's work. But somewhere between the sound of the radiator and the silence outside, I started to think about those dark buildings across the lot, the ones that looked hollow. I would go there tomorrow. I would start with the farthest door. And that would be the last ordinary decision I ever made. Morning didn't come with light that day. It came with the sound of metal, the thin rattle of my car keys, the groan of the door, the hum of air that felt too heavy to breathe. I left before sunrise, the box of flyers riding in the trunk like a sleeping passenger. The sky was still the color of concrete. No birds, no traffic, just a single train somewhere in the distance, moving without purpose. I remember the gas station coffee cooling in my hand as I drove. It tasted like ash. The road signs all pointed toward places that didn't sound real. Milford Heights, Lakeview Court, Silver Pines. Each name promised people, but every block I passed looked more abandoned. When I turned into the complex I'd seen the night before, the air changed. The buildings rose from the fog like slabs of bone, 5 stories each, long corridors running the length of them, doors stacked in perfect rhythm. The paint had turned a shade between yellow and gray, something that didn't belong to any season. There were no cars parked out front, no laundry lines, no satellite dishes. Just silence. I parked by the side, left the engine running for a moment, then killed it. The echo rolled through the lot, bounced off the walls, and vanished. The first door I tried was locked. The second opened half an inch, held by a chain from the inside. The third was sealed with plywood. I started taping flyers to each, careful to press them flat, the paper curling against the moisture in the air. The smell of mold clung to my fingers. My phone showed 4:23 p.m. Somehow the whole day had already gone. The stairwell lights flickered but never stayed on. I used the flashlight from my phone, its beam cutting through the dust like smoke. Every few minutes, a distant thump echoed from somewhere above. Pipes, maybe, or doors shifting from old air. On the 4th floor, I found a door left slightly open. I thought someone might be inside, maybe a squatter or an old tenant packing up. I said hello, softly. No answer. The door moved when I pushed. The hinges didn't creak. They sighed, slow and dry. Inside, the smell hit first. Dust, metal, something like wet cardboard. The living room was empty except for a broken chair and a glass ashtray filled with rainwater. Wallpaper peeled off the corners like loose skin. The carpet was stained in a dark, uneven patch that might have been water, or something else that dried a long time ago. I took one step inside, enough for the door to close behind me. The click was sharper than I expected. For a second, it felt like someone else had done it. I turned, grabbed the handle. It turned freely, but the door didn't move. Something on the other side was holding it, or maybe the frame had swollen. I didn't know. I pushed harder, twice. The second time, the door opened an inch. Cold air seeped in. It smelled of rust and concrete. I stepped back and decided to leave it half open. No reason to draw attention. In the kitchen, the counter was covered in dust thick enough to trace lines through. I found a few things that didn't belong. A spoon bent backward, a child's sock, a half-burned candle. The sink was dry but smelled like soil. I stayed maybe 2 minutes, maybe 10. It's hard to tell. The light outside had turned orange, slanting through the window in thin blades. When I stepped out again, the hallway felt different, darker, longer, stretched in ways that didn't fit. At the far end, something flickered. Not light. Reflection. A mirror had been left leaning against the wall, full length, cracked from top to bottom. My reflection was split, one half lagging behind the other when I moved. I kept walking. Every door I passed had something wrong with it. A missing knob, a dent, a rusted hinge. One door had deep scratches around the lock, thin and precise, as if made by small hands. When I stopped to tape another flyer, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. The flyer I'd taped 2 minutes earlier was gone. Just gone. The tape remained, torn into 2 clean strips. The paper had been peeled off. I turned, checked the hallway. No one, no sound. I told myself wind could do that, even though there was none. By the time I reached the bottom floor, it was nearly dark. My phone battery blinked red. I decided to finish one more building before leaving. The next block over looked smaller, maybe 4 stories. I crossed the lot, crunching over broken glass and gravel. The lights in that building were dead. Completely. The first door I opened had no number. The second opened too easily. Inside, it was colder than outside, as if the walls were breathing out. I set a flyer on the table by habit, then froze. The table had already been set, a cup, a spoon, and a small pile of cigarette ash perfectly centered. There was no dust on it, not even a fingerprint. Someone had been here. Maybe still was. I backed out slowly. My hand brushed the wall, and flakes of paint came off like dried leaves. On the landing between the second and third floors, I heard footsteps. Not heavy, not close. Just one step every few seconds, like someone pacing, counting time wrong. I stopped breathing. The sound came from above, stopped, started again, now behind me. I turned, but the stairs were empty. My own flashlight shook, making the shadows move even when nothing else did. I decided to leave. I don't know why I didn't run. Maybe because running makes noise and noise tells something where you are. I made it to the door. The handle turned but didn't open. The same soft resistance, like before. I tried again, harder. It gave way on the third try, slamming open into the evening air. Outside, the parking lot was dim. One light flickered above the far corner, buzzing like an insect trapped inside glass. I walked fast, not running, just fast enough to keep the sound of my own steps steady. When I reached my car, the windshield was fogged from the inside. I wiped it with my sleeve, but the smear didn't clear. The moisture was trapped behind the glass, like someone had been sitting there, breathing. I unlocked the door and checked the back seat. Empty. But the smell was wrong. Not smoke, not dust. Sweet, faint, like perfume gone bad. I sat there for a while trying to think. My hands left gray marks on the steering wheel. The box of flyers was still in the trunk, untouched except for one layer missing. I told myself I'd come back in daylight. Maybe bring Dylan next time, maybe not come back at all. The radio turned on by itself again. Static first, then a voice half swallowed by noise. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard my own name once, not shouted, not called, just said, calmly. The voice stopped. The static didn't. I drove home with it hissing the whole way, like air escaping from something that had been sealed too long. When I pulled into my driveway, the radio went silent. No fade, no click. Just gone. The night air smelled the same as that hallway. Iron and mold. I sat there until the engine cooled, watching the reflection of my porch light on the windshield. The same faint outline that wouldn't clear. It looked almost like someone sitting in the passenger seat, breathing slow. And for a long time, I didn't move. The next day began without memory. I remember unlocking the door, starting the car, but not the drive itself. The road blurred into a gray ribbon, and by the time I noticed the dashboard clock, it was already past noon. The box of flyers was still in the trunk, the corners softening with heat. I told myself it would be the last day I did this. The town looked different in daylight. Not cleaner, not safer, just drained. Windows were open, but no curtains moved. Lawns turned to dirt patches. A newspaper lay in a driveway, dated 4 days ago. I parked in the same lot as before, between 2 lampposts that hadn't worked in years. The light poles were wrapped in tape and rust, the numbers stenciled halfway down. 3A, 3B. I tried to remember if those had been there yesterday. The air inside the building was colder. It smelled of metal and soil again, but heavier, like rain on copper. Dust floated in the beam of my flashlight, thick enough to look alive. I started on the lower floors this time, telling myself it would be faster that way. The first hallway was darker than before. Someone had drawn something on the wall. Straight lines, uneven, like tally marks scratched by a coin. I counted them without meaning to. 32. The first door I taped felt soft under my hand. Paint, swollen from moisture. The tape didn't stick, it just slid off. I pressed harder, left the paper crooked, and moved on. Halfway down the corridor, I heard a voice. Faint, female, not words, just the rhythm of speech, one tone repeating like a question. I stopped. The sound didn't stop with me. I turned off my light, waited. The voice paused, then stopped too. Silence. The floor creaked. Another step. 2. Then nothing. When I turned the light back on, there was only dust moving. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been standing right where I was a second ago. I went up. The stairwell smelled of wet cement. My phone vibrated once. No signal, no notification. Just the vibration itself, like a pulse from somewhere else in the building. On the 3rd floor, one door was open wide. Inside, boxes were stacked against the walls, labeled in handwriting I couldn't read. The ink had bled, turning every word into black smears. I looked around for any sign of life. The air felt recently disturbed. Near the kitchen sink, there was a plate with crumbs, a glass half full of water. The surface still rippled when I looked at it. I backed out slowly. My shoes stuck to the floor, leaving prints in the dust. When I reached the end of the hall, I noticed the stairway door was now shut. I hadn't closed it. I tried the handle, locked. I looked for another way down. There was a window beside the emergency exit. The glass cracked into a spider web. I pressed my fingers against it. It shifted inward. Not enough to break. I started walking back the way I came. Halfway through, one of the doors on my right moved. Not opened, just moved, a fraction of an inch. A girl's voice, quiet, too close. "Excuse me." I froze. She was standing at the end of the hall, maybe 15, maybe younger. Hair too neat for a place like this, clothes too clean. She tilted her head slightly, watching me. "Are you lost?" I asked. She didn't answer, only looked at the flyer in my hand. Her eyes followed it until I lowered it. "You can't post those here," she said. Her tone was light, almost polite. Then she smiled, small and wrong, like she was trying out the expression. "Sorry," I said. "I'm just—" "You should come inside," she interrupted. "My dad wants to talk to you." I looked past her. The hallway behind her was dark, but there was a faint light spilling out from one door, pale yellow. "I'm fine," I said. "I'll just finish this floor and—" She turned around, walked back to the open door without another word. The sound of her steps was too soft, like she was barefoot. I stood there a while, then followed. Not because I wanted to, because it felt worse not to. The door was open. The air inside was colder, sharper. I could smell something chemical. Maybe paint, maybe bleach. "Hello." No answer. I stepped in, one hand on the frame. The living room was empty except for a table and a single chair. The wallpaper was torn halfway down the wall, exposing brown plaster beneath. Then the door closed behind me. Not slammed, just pushed. I turned immediately. A man stood there, maybe 40, face broad and pale, eyes flat. He said something I didn't understand, then in broken English, "Sit down." He moved his hand slightly. Another figure appeared from the hallway, thinner, younger, watching silently. Behind them, I could see a third, standing near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. The girl from before stepped out from behind the door and leaned against the wall. She wasn't smiling anymore. I backed toward the table. The chair was metal, its legs uneven. I sat. "Money," the man said. I pulled out my wallet, handed it over. He opened it, looked inside, threw it on the floor. "Phone." I gave him that too. He spoke again to the others, low and fast. I couldn't follow the words. One of them nodded, left the room. The other two stayed. They made me empty my pockets. Keys, lighter, nothing else. One of them took the keys, twirled them once, pocketed them. The man in front of me crouched, his face close enough for me to see the scar under his eye. His breath smelled like old fruit. "You come alone?" I nodded. "Who tell you come here?" I said it was just for work, for flyers. He looked at me a long time. His expression didn't change. Then he straightened and said something to the others. One of them came back with a plastic zip tie. I didn't move until I felt it bite around my wrists. The sound it made, that short, dry click, was louder than everything else. They pushed me toward the bedroom. The light in there was dim, filtered through a torn curtain. The mattress on the floor was stained, no sheets. The smell of mildew burned my throat. They sat me down, tied my ankles with another zip tie, then stepped back. The girl leaned in the doorway. She looked at me like I was furniture. "Stay," the man said. Then they left. The sound of the lock sliding into place was clean, almost careful. I waited, counted minutes by the rhythm of my own heartbeat. I tried to twist my wrists, but the plastic cut deeper every time. At some point I heard voices again from the other room. Not arguing, just moving, calm, methodical. Drawers opening, chairs scraping, a door slammed, footsteps faded, then silence. I sat there until the light shifted, until it wasn't orange anymore. My hands had gone numb. When I leaned back against the wall, I felt something cold press into my shoulder. I turned. It was a pipe running along the wall, thick, wet, humming faintly. I thought about calling for help, then realized I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know where I was. The smell changed. Less dust now, more like oil. Something mechanical started below the floor, a steady vibration, deep and low. I tried to stand, but the ties held. I could only listen. Then, footsteps again. Closer. The door handle moved once. It didn't open. Then again, slower. When it finally turned, I held my breath. The door opened halfway. Light from the hallway cut across the floor. The girl stepped in, holding something. A phone. Mine. She crouched down, placed it on the floor beside me, screen facing up. The light was still on. The display showed the camera app, recording. She whispered something, too quiet to understand, then smiled again, this time wider, like she'd remembered how. She stood, walked back out, and closed the door. The recording light stayed on. I could hear her footsteps fade down the hall, each one softer than the last, until there was nothing left but the low hum from below and the sound of my own breathing echoing in the dark. I don't remember how long I sat there after she left. The phone's screen was still glowing, bright enough to paint a square of light on the floor. It made the dust shimmer when I moved. The record timer on the corner kept counting. 00913, 00914, 00:09:15. I tried to speak, to ask who she was, why she had done this, but my voice came out flat, like it belonged to someone else. There was no answer. Only the hum below the floor and the faint drip of water inside the wall. I leaned forward until my wrists burned against the plastic. I thought if I twisted fast enough, maybe the edge would snap. It didn't. The skin broke first. At 002308, the sound outside changed. A door opening, steps, then voices again, low, distant, male. I could hear a scraping sound. Something metallic dragged across the floor. The light under the door flickered once. Then shadows moved across it. Wide shoulders, slow movements. Someone said something in a language I didn't know, and the others laughed. The vibration under the floor grew louder, heavier, rhythmic, like a machine starting up. The wall trembled. Bits of plaster fell into my hair. The door opened. 2 men came in. The taller one had my jacket slung over his shoulder. He said nothing, just pointed toward me. The other walked around me once, slow, deliberate. He knelt, touched the zip tie, nodded, then cut it with a short blade. My hands dropped to my lap, stiff and bleeding. Before I could move, the taller one grabbed my collar, pulling me up hard enough to make the room spin. They walked me out of the bedroom, into the main room where the table still stood. The girl was gone. The man who had first spoken to me sat by the table now, smoking. He didn't look up. The one holding me shoved me into the chair. My knees hit the metal edge. The smell of smoke and something sweet filled the air. The man at the table finally spoke. "You try call?" I shook my head. He pointed at the phone still recording on the floor. The screen showed only my legs and the chair. He said something to the others, then crushed the cigarette in his hand, ashes sticking to his skin. "Delete," he said. I reached for it. My fingers slipped on the blood. I wiped the screen on my sleeve and tapped the red square. The recording stopped. He leaned forward. "You smart man. You listen, go home. Don't tell police. Understand?" I nodded again. He smiled without humor, a small twitch of his mouth. "Good." Then we finished. The smaller man behind me said something quick, sharp. The one by the window answered with a laugh. Then a sound I still hear when I try to sleep. A metal click, like a gun being checked. I didn't see it, only heard it. The man at the table exhaled and said something to calm them down. He waved his hand, bored. "No gun. Not here," silence followed, heavy, stretched too long. Finally, the taller one grabbed my arm again and pulled me toward the hall. The floor beneath us vibrated with every step. The air grew thicker, heavier. At the stairwell door, he stopped, looked down the steps, then back at me. "Run," he said. His accent broke the word in half. "Run." I didn't move. He shoved me hard enough that I stumbled down 2 steps. "Go!" I ran, bare feet on cold concrete, hands burning, lungs cutting. The stairwell twisted left, then right, then ended in a corridor I didn't recognize. Every door I passed was closed. Every light was off. Somewhere behind me, the shouting began. Not English. Short, urgent bursts. I reached the first floor, found the exit door locked from the inside. I slammed my shoulder into it once, twice. The third time it opened halfway. Outside, the air hit like a slap. It was night again. I ran across the lot, gravel cutting my feet. My car was still there, pale under the streetlight. The front window was cracked now, spidered across the middle. I reached for the handle. Locked. My keys were gone. Behind me, the door slammed open. The men spilled out, voices echoing off the walls. One carried something long, a pipe, maybe. Another held a flashlight, the beam jerking across the cars. I crouched beside my rear tire, waited for the light to swing away, then crawled under the car. The ground was wet. Oil or water. It smelled like both. Boots scraped the asphalt near my head. A voice said something close. The beam of the flashlight passed inches from my eyes. It stopped. I didn't breathe. Then the light moved on. Someone kicked the bumper hard. The metal shuddered. I bit my lip to keep from gasping. When their footsteps finally faded, I counted to 60 before crawling out. My hands left red prints on the pavement. I ran again, this time toward the road. The street stretched empty in both directions. No cars, no sound, just the wind moving trash along the gutter. I followed the sidewalk until the buildings disappeared behind me. My legs shook, my mouth dry enough to taste metal. After what felt like hours, I saw lights. Yellow, steady, low to the ground. A small convenience store stood at the corner, its door propped open. I went inside. The man behind the counter looked up once, then back down at his phone. He didn't ask about the blood, or the dirt, or the way I kept looking over my shoulder. "Phone," I said. He pointed toward the back, to a pay phone that looked older than both of us. The receiver smelled like copper. I dialed Dylan's number from memory. It rang once, twice, 3 times. When he answered, I couldn't form the words. "Eric." I nodded before remembering he couldn't see me. "Where the hell are you?" "Don't come here," I said. My voice cracked. "They're still." The line went dead. I stared at the receiver. The dial tone didn't return. Just static, faint and steady. The same hiss from my car radio. The man behind the counter was watching me now. His eyes flicked toward the window. Outside, a car had stopped by the curb. Headlights off. I hung up, backed away. He said nothing, only turned the radio louder. A country song, soft and slow, drowning the hum in the walls. I ran out the back door. The alley behind the store was narrow, filled with trash bins and broken pallets. I climbed over one, slipped, hit the ground. My knee split open. The car engine outside started, then idled. The headlights swept across the alley mouth, searching. I pressed myself against the wall, waiting for the beam to pass. It didn't. It froze on the far end, steady, silent. A door opened. Footsteps again, measured, patient. I crawled behind a bin, tried to stay small. My heartbeat was louder than the engine. The footsteps stopped. A shadow crossed the wall beside me, then another. One of them said something I didn't understand. Then, quieter, in English. "You can't hide forever." I stayed there until the light faded, until the engine started again and rolled away. When I finally stood, the street was empty. The night air smelled of garbage and rain. I limped toward the main road, passing houses with lights off, windows sealed. I thought about knocking, asking for help. But my reflection in the glass looked too far gone. Shirt torn, hands shaking, blood drying on my arms. No one would open their door for that. By the time I reached the next intersection, the store lights were gone behind me. The sky had turned gray again, the kind of gray that never becomes morning. I walked until my legs gave out. Found an abandoned bus stop. Sat there until the streetlights shut off one by one. When I looked at my hands, I saw marks from the zip ties still pressed into my skin, thin white circles cutting across the bruises. I thought about calling again, about walking until I found a police station or someone awake. But my pockets were empty. The only sound left was the wind moving through the wires above, humming like the floor of that room. I don't remember falling asleep. I just remember the quiet, and the feeling that somewhere behind that quiet, the car had stopped again. When I woke, the sky was the same color as the asphalt. No sun, no shape, just light that had forgotten what to do with itself. My back ached from the metal bench. My hands were stiff, swollen. For a few seconds, I didn't know where I was. Then the smell came back, oil, dust, the faint rot of something that had been left too long. The street around me was empty. Cars passed sometimes, slow and distant, but none stopped. I tried to stand, failed the first time, then forced my legs to move. The box of flyers was still in my car, somewhere behind that building, but I didn't go back. The thought of it made my stomach turn. A bus came down the road, brakes hissing. The driver looked at me through the glass, eyes narrow. He didn't ask for fare when I stepped on. Maybe he saw the blood on my sleeve. Maybe he didn't want to ask. I sat near the back, staring at the window. My reflection looked thin, hollow. I tried to watch the world outside, but it all looked the same. Rows of cracked parking lots, warehouses, low buildings with broken signs. Nothing looked alive. When the bus stopped near the downtown strip, I got off. The air smelled of exhaust and rain. I found a payphone outside a laundromat, the receiver hanging crooked from its cord. Dylan answered on the second ring. "Where are you?" "Somewhere near East Ridge." "I don't know. Police are looking for you," he said. "You didn't come home last night." "They found your car." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean found?" "It was left running. Doors open, flyers all over the ground. They said they'll need you to—" The line cracked. I heard voices in the background, muffled, then silence. "Dylan?" Only static. I hung up, called again. No answer. Inside the laundromat. Machines turned slowly, clothes moving in colorless circles. A woman folded towels near the door, humming to herself. I walked in, asked if there was another phone nearby. She shook her head. Her eyes didn't leave the towels. I thanked her, left. The air outside had shifted again. Warmer, heavier. The wind carried dust down the street, small torn papers fluttering along the curb. When I looked closer, I realized they were mine. Flyers, damp and crumpled. The red ink running down like blood. Someone had pasted one on a lamppost near the corner. The number printed at the bottom was gone, peeled away. In its place was another, a new one. I memorized it before I could stop myself. That evening, I made it back to my apartment. The door was still unlocked from the night before. The air inside felt untouched, stale in the corners. I locked it behind me, turned on the lamp, then sat on the floor beside the window. The noise outside was distant, like a city happening to someone else. My phone was still gone, my wallet too. The only thing I had left was the cut plastic still around my wrist, half snapped. I tried to clean the blood, but it had already dried into the lines of my palms. For a long time, I listened. To the pipes, the refrigerator hum, the quiet rhythm of traffic. Normal sounds, human sounds. But every time I blinked, I saw that room again, the table, the cigarette smoke, the girl's calm face as she left me there, the way she looked at the phone before she pressed record. I didn't tell the police. I didn't tell anyone. 2 days later, Dylan came to my door. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red. He looked at me like I was something that shouldn't be standing. "You didn't answer," he said. "They came to me this morning, asked questions." "About what?" He hesitated. "About your car. About the building. They said there's nothing there now. It's gone." "Gone?" "Demolished." Cleared out last night. I stared at him, waiting for more. He rubbed his neck, looked at the floor. "You sure you were even there?" "I was." He didn't argue. He just left. That night I couldn't sleep again. The city outside moved like it always had, lights changing, cars passing. At 2:47 a.m., someone knocked on my door. 3 times, even rhythm. I froze. The knock came again. I looked through the peephole. No one there. For a moment, I thought it was my mind replaying things that hadn't finished. But then I noticed something at the bottom of the door. A piece of paper slid halfway underneath. I knelt, pulled it through. A flyer. My flyer. The ink was fresh, still wet. The number printed at the bottom was not mine. It was the same one I'd seen on the lamppost. I stared until the numbers blurred. Then the phone rang. An unknown number. Same digits. I didn't answer. It rang 4 times, then stopped. Silence stretched across the room. The air smelled of dust again. Something mechanical started to hum in the wall. I unplugged the lamp. sat in the dark. My reflection in the window moved half a second late, as if the glass had its own memory. When dawn came, I left. No suitcase, no explanation. Just walked out, down the stairwell, into the street. I told myself I'd find Dylan, that we'd figure out what to tell the police. But when I reached the diner where we'd first met, the sign was gone. The building was empty, windows covered in brown paper. I tried the door anyway. Locked. Through the gap, I could see the inside stripped bare. No tables, no counter, just dust and one folded chair in the middle of the floor. A single sheet of paper lay on it, faint letters printed in red. The top line read, "For sale. Call this number," and below it, the same digits. They say missing persons have a pattern. First the silence, then the delay. Then the world rearranges itself until you were never there. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe I left something in that room, a name, a sound, a part of time that refused to move. Every few days I hear my phone buzz even though it's gone. Every night I see headlights stop outside, but no car when I look again. I keep thinking I'll call the police, tell them everything, but there's no evidence, no proof, not even a building. Just me and the number that won't stop ringing. And sometimes, when I pick up, there's nothing but static. The same steady hiss I heard before I disappeared. That was tonight's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll return with another tale of fear. This was The White Rabbit Witch.